Hi everyone. In this episode, we're finally tackling Raiders of the Lost Ark, which, despite being a classic, features a problematic relationship between a professor and an underage girl. This leads us to the topic of sexual harassment in archaeology, and even though our discussion never gets explicit, I'm going to offer this as a minor content warning on this episode. Welcome to Screens of the Stone Age, the podcast where scientists review movies about prehistoric people. My name is Josh Lindell. I'm a grad student studying Neanderthal teeth, and I'm here with...
I'm Dr. Kimberly Plomp. I am a bioarchaeologist. I study the human skeleton, health and disease, and evolution.
And I'm Dr. Ross Barnett, a paleogeneticist looking mostly at ancient DNA from cats.
And today we are looking at Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. Or, that's not what it's called. It's just called Raiders of the Lost Ark. There's no Indiana Jones in the title of this movie, is there?
There wasn't, but now there is. So when it was originally released, it was just Raiders. But they've repackaged it with after the sequels came out, so that they're all Indiana Jones, as you can see on my DVD cover.
Right.
George Lucas always has to change everything after the fact.
Yeah, well, Spielberg also gets some tickings off for that as well.
Speaking of, we're recording this on Star Wars Day. May the 4th be with you.
Oh, yeah.
That's very true. Very true.
We're not talking about Star Wars, we're talking about Indiana Jones. We had to get to it eventually, even though there's really no Stone Age in this movie at all.
Mm-mm.
We can talk about a little bit of archaeology, but there's not really any good archaeology in this movie either.
No, but we've done movies with less.
So I'm sure most people have seen this movie, but who wants to summarize it?
I could, since Kim did the last one. But yeah, you're right. If you haven't seen this film already, then what's wrong with you?
I actually hadn't seen it until my late 20s, I think. Even though I'm an archaeologist, this had no impact on me becoming an archaeologist because I'd never seen it as a child.
That is crazy.
Wow.
How?
Yeah, that is crazy.
How is that even possible?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Man, I'm just going to have to take a minute to process that.
Yeah, you're lucky they didn't find out and kick you out of school.
Yeah, surely that's on the entrance exam.
Yeah.
I made up for it by now since I teach a course on archaeology and pop culture, and half of it is Indiana Jones. So,
okay. Well, for those people like Josh who have inexplicably not seen the film, it starts very dramatically in the South American jungle, where you have the kind of classic silhouette. You don't see his face until about sort of 5 minutes in, but you have this classic silhouette of Indy with his hat and his leather jacket and his bullwhip with two assistants, trackers, kind of guides going somewhere. You don't know at first, but it becomes clear that they're looking for something and they're being kind of followed by some hostiles. In the first kind of 5 minutes, Indy gets betrayed by one of the guides who's going to try and shoot him, but the other one, Sapito, saves him, and so he's left with one guide, and they go in to this cave entrance, which is really spooky. There's giant tarantulas, bugs, all sorts of gross stuff, and it becomes apparent that it is a kind of booby-trapped tomb/temple, which has a fantastic golden idol in it. So they have to kind of negotiate a whole bunch of traps. There's spikes that come out of the wall, where they find the remains of one of Indy's friends who'd previously been searching for this treasure. They find a really ingenious checkerboard kind of floor, which if you step on the wrong step, which will trigger a kind of poison arrow to fire at you. And there's also one where if you step within some beams of light, then you'll get poison arrows fired at you as well. So Indy, being the kind of hero and the main character, he is very blasé about all these traps. He knows how to get through them, and eventually they get to... Well, they also have to sort of jump over a kind of massive chasm where he uses his famous bullwhip as a kind of swing to get from one side to the other. And he gets to this golden idol, and there's a very famous moment where you don't really know what he's doing. He's kind of just looking at it and kind of sizing it up. We'd seen earlier that he'd taken a bag of sand from outside the entrance to the cave, and you kind of wonder, well, what the hell was that for? It must be some kind of special archaeology technique. And it kind of is. He he realizes that there's a pressure-activated trap underneath the golden idol, and he has to very carefully estimate how heavy the idol is so he can swap it for a bag of sand so that it doesn't trigger the booby trap mechanism. And he successfully does this for a few seconds, and then you see the bag of sand sort of slowly sink into the pedestal that the golden idol had just been on, and things start to go very quickly south. The temple starts to collapse. He has to run over the checkerboard, and there's poison arrows flying everywhere. The kind of temple walls are falling. There's a massive... no, the boulder doesn't happen then, does it? So he has to escape. He uses his whip again, and Sapito goes over first of all, but there's a kind of problem, and the whip comes off. So Sapito has the whip, and Indy has the idol. He asks for the whip so he can get across. Sapito says, "Throw me the idol and I'll throw you the whip." So Indy, being the genuine, honest guy that he is, throws him the idol, but Sapito does not throw the whip, and so Indy has to basically jump across this chasm while Sapito runs away with the idol. But he manages to get over the other side. Of course he does. He's the hero. And just outside of the room that they've been in, he finds Sapito impaled upon the spikes that they'd seen earlier that got the other adventurer. And so he just picks up the idol and continues escaping. And then another very famous scene. It's a perfect movie. It's just basically like one amazing scene after another. As part of the collapse of the temple, there's a huge stone boulder that comes rolling down. It's been parodied so many times in so many different kind of media. But he has to kind of escape this giant stone ball that rolls and kind of crushes everything in its path. But he gets out of the cave with the idol, and that's great. He escapes everything. But then outside, he meets Belak, who is this smarmy, sleazy French obtainer of rare goods, who seems to have, well, he has enlisted the help of the Jovitos, I think is what he calls them, who were the people that had been tracking Indy before. They're they're meant to be the native peoples of the region who have some kind of devotion to this temple and the golden statue that Indy's essentially just stolen. And Belak takes it off him and has the Jovitos kind of surround Indy, and he has a very smarmy speech about how there's nothing Indiana Jones can possess that he cannot take away. And so they have a little bit of kind of back and forth. Belak speaks Jovito, Indy doesn't. And so Belak shouts some kind of words to the Jovitos, and they all kind of genuflect before the statue, which gives Indy a chance to kind of run away. And so he has like about a 10-second head start, which varies as you see various wide shots from, being a couple of meters to about half a mile between him and the Jovitos who are chasing after him. Luckily, he's got his friend Mac, who's got a amphibious seaplane, which is what he presumably came to the site in, and he runs towards it and escapes all the arrows, very inaccurately fired by the Jovitos, who you have to assume are people that make their living by hunting in the rainforest, yet somehow they miss him from like 3 meters away. But he gets to the seaplane, and they escape with their lives, if not with the gold statue. And we see another interesting facet of Indy's character early on, in that Mac has a pet snake, which is sitting in the Indy seat. And Indiana Jones, despite having faced death about a dozen times in the first 5 minutes, hates snakes. And this is one of his kind of defining character traits, is that he's an ophidiophobe. He has a fear of snakes. And that's something that comes back at various points in the film. So that's it. There's like the intro scenes, fantastic theme tune, which is, John Williams, one of his best works, along with sort of Star Wars and other things. And we sort of cut to Indy teaching. So he is an archaeologist. He teaches archaeology at, funnily enough, Barnet College. That's the kind of fictional college that he teaches at in a nondescript American college town. We see that his class is made up, I think, 99% of the students are attractive women. There's a great scene where he's teaching, and one of the girls very coquettishly bats her eyelids at him, and we see that written on her eyelids, so you can only see it when her eyes are closed. It has "I love you," which is amazing. A great scene, and Indiana, while he's trying to explain, I think Neolithic tomb cultures, gets flustered. But it's great, and he finishes teaching. The class gets out. We meet Denholm Elliott's character, who is, I guess, head of department for the archaeology department at the university. Indiana tells him about his exploits in South America, how he's got good pieces for the museum, but that Balak had taken the idol. But that's kind of neither here nor there, because Denholm Elliott tells Indy that they've got some visitors. Some people have come especially to see him. So they go and meet these visitors, who are top men from the US government, who have intercepted a Nazi cable talking about the Staff of Ra and various other kind of archaeological things. And Indy suggests that they should speak to Abner Ravenwood. That Abner Ravenwood has gone missing, and so they've come to him. And so he explains to them that the Staff of Ra is apparently a kind of signpost on the way to finding the resting place of the Ark of the Covenant. And the Ark of the Covenant is described in the Bible, like, in quite a lot of detail, actually, as it's the receptacle for the second set of tablets that Moses took down from Mount Sinai, as well as some manna and the staff of Aaron, which is all pretty special stuff. And Indy explains to the top men from the government how it is essentially a kind of weapon, that it has phenomenal power, not just to kind of command the faithful, but also to kind of unleash devastation on the people it's turned against. So this is the kind of reasoning why the Nazis are after it. They see it as a potential weapon in the lead up to World War II. So what transpires is that while Ravenwood would be the person to speak to it, Indy's probably the best person to go and find him, because he was his graduate student. He taught him everything he knew. He knows roughly where he is. He has history with Ravenwood. He thinks he's in Tibet, Nepal, somewhere in the Himalayan borders. And so he gets essentially conscripted by the US government to go and find Ravenwood, figure out what's going on with the Nazis on their search for the Ark, and get a move on with either recovering it themselves or stopping the Nazis from getting it. So he goes to Nepal. He finds Marion Ravenwood, who's Abner's daughter, running a bar. Marion's not very pleased to see him. They have some bad history between them. Clearly they had been together at some point, and it had ended quite badly. But Indy tells her that he is interested in a medallion that Abner had, which was supposed to be part of the Staff of Ra, and he would like to buy it off her. She says she'll think about it, come back tomorrow, and she'll see if she can find it. And Indy says okay, and disappears. But what he doesn't realize is that the Nazis are also following him, and they've tracked him to Marion's bar and come in pretty soon after he's left. And they're not quite so generous in the terms of what they'd be willing to give for the amulet. So there's a very scary Nazi officer called Todt, who is incredibly creepy and very brutal, who threatens Marion with a red-hot poker and has lots of great kind of chilling lines about how he's willing to offer her a whole lot more than Indiana would. What Indiana and the Nazis don't realize at this point is that Marion has the amulet as a kind of necklace. So she's known where it's been the whole time. She's had it around her neck. But just as things are heating up and the Nazis are about to torture her, Indiana comes back and basically saves her. They kill a lot of people. The bar burns down. The amulet kind of gets lost in the fire and all the kind of action. Todt, the Nazi, very unwisely goes to try and pick it up after it had been in a red-hot fire. And we see it burn his hand. He has to run outside and stick his hand into the snow. And that's a very important and clever plot point for later on. But after the bar is burnt down and the Nazis have been killed, but Marion and Indy are okay, she rescues the amulet and says that after all the trouble that he's caused her again, she's going to be his goddamn partner in this sort of quest. And so, I think a little bit of time passes. They then head to Egypt, where there has been word of a massive Nazi archaeological expedition going on, where they think they've found the city of Tanis, which is apparently where you could use the Staff of Ra to find out where exactly the Ark of the Covenant is buried. And so Indy and Marion go to the site. They meet up with Indy's old friend Salah, played by Jonathan Rhys-Davies, who much younger viewers will know from Lord of the Rings. He plays Gimli. And Salah is one of the best diggers in Egypt, apparently. He has access to the site, and he's going to help Indy. And then what happens next is that they do a bit of exploring in the kind of old town of where they're staying in Egypt, and get into trouble pretty much straight away. So that's just Indy's thing. He gets chased. They have like a whole bunch of set pieces of fights in the market stalls, hiding in laundry baskets. It's all kind of very exciting. There's a classic scene where he meets a kind of sword-wielding adversary who shows off his prowess with a massive kind of scimitar, and Indiana just shoots him. That's an amazing scene that's been parodied many, many times as well. And according to legend, was because Indiana Jones' actor Harrison Ford was suffering from dysentery at the time, and they had scripted a big fight scene, but he was so unwell with dysentery that he kind of ad-libbed the act of just shooting this guy instead of having a big fight. And it worked so well that they kept it in the film. Anyway, so there's chasing. Marion gets captured. It looks like she has actually been killed. She seems to be in a truck that gets blown up. Later on, we find that's not the case, but it's a sad moment, and Indy goes off to kind of drown his sorrows. But he doesn't really mope for too long. Pretty quickly, they're deciphering the instructions on the amulet that he still has for Marion. They built a staff. So the two sides of the amulet give instructions for how to build the Staff of Ra, what height it has to be, and then one side says how tall it should be, and the other side says you have to take a little bit off that, just a little off the top, so that it's the right size. And the way it works is it's like a key. So you go to a kind of three-dimensional map room in Tanis, you put the amulet on top of the staff, which is at the right height. At a certain time, the sun streams in through an opening, hits the crystal that's in the amulet, and points out in the map room where the Ark is buried. I mean, it's needlessly complex. They could have just written it down, but you need to have some MacGuffins to move the plot forward. So what this means is that they figure out that the Nazis are actually digging for the Ark in the wrong place. They have a Staff of Ra that is the wrong height. Nobody can figure out how they have the Staff of Ra, because Indy has the amulet that he got from Marion. But we see very cleverly when Todt appears in a later scene doing the Hitler salute, that he has the imprint of the amulet on his hand from when he tried to pick it up, and it was burning hot. So he has half of the amulet kind of branded into his hand, and that explains why they have the staff of the wrong height, because they only have instructions for how tall to make it, and not to take that little bit off the top, which is on the other side, which isn't burned into his hand. So, having realized this, Indy's got some time, so him and Salah break into the map room with the correct staff, and it tells them exactly where the real Ark of the Covenant is stored, the Well of Souls, as it is known. And so while the Nazis are digging in the wrong place, Indy and Salah arrange a nighttime dig in the correct place into the Well of Souls, which they open up and see that it looks like it's moving at the bottom because there are snakes. And of course, the one weakness we know of Indy is that he doesn't like snakes. And Salah very amusingly makes it worse by saying, "Asps, very dangerous. You go first." Which is a great line. So Indy goes down, but before they really do much, they manage to find the Ark of the Covenant. They carefully lift it out with the special poles that they're there for carrying it. The Ark is so holy and so dangerous that it's not supposed to be touched by a human hand. It has to be carried by poles. And this is stuff that's actually written in the Old Testament. But while they're doing that, this nighttime dig does not go unnoticed. And so the Nazis see that something is going on. They capture Sala and the other diggers. And they also have Marion, and they take her and they throw her into the Well of Souls with Indy. They take the Ark of the Covenant and they lock them back up. It's all very scary. They're abandoned in the Well of Souls with thousands of snakes, with no exit. They don't really know what to do. The lights are going out. They're trapped. And the Nazis have the Ark. But luckily, Indy being the resourceful character that he is, they managed to basically wreck the place. Thousands of years of archaeology goes up in flames, gets toppled over, and they manage to find a kind of side exit through some of the stonework and escape. In escaping, they try and kind of follow where the Ark is going. They end up in a kind of Nazi airfield. They have some great fight sequences with some kind of fairly angry soldiers and manage to escape. But essentially it's a loss. They've led the Nazis to the Ark, and they don't have anything to kind of, they don't know where they're going or how to stop them. I'm kind of waffling a bit, but I think the next sort of bit that moves on is that Sala helps them get passage on a ship. Am I missing anything out? Anyone want to jump in with stuff?
I think that's about it.
That's about it, yeah. It's just
So
a lot of fire and like excitement, but
lots of excitement.
yeah.
And great one-liners and all sorts of stuff. So they get passage on a ship as kind of secret cargo, and while they're on this ship, they actually get intercepted by the Nazis in a U-boat, who are, I don't know if they're actually looking for Indy or if they know he's there. They don't find him, but they do they find Marion and they
On the
take
boat?
her away.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
the
they take her.
captain of the boat says that tells him that he killed Indy because he wasn't worth anything, but they kept Marion because she was worth, they could sell her.
Yeah.
So he lied, like in a smart
He
way.
lies. So he's a goodie. The captain's one of the good guys.
Yeah.
But Indy, while all this is going on, while Marion's being captured, he's swimming over to the U-boat and breaking on board this Nazi U-boat, which is fantastic. And there's like a rousing version of the Indiana Jones theme as he kind of escapes with the Nazis towards where the Ark is going to be. And so they get to this remote Mediterranean island, and Indy now has to rescue Marion, stop them from using the Ark. But what they're going to do is essentially do a dry run of unleashing the Ark's powers, because they don't want to take it to Berlin and have it be a kind of flub. So Belloc and Todt and the kind of Nazi officers are going to open it up on this remote island just to check that it works as it's supposed to. And so Indy kind of roughs up some submariners, steals himself a horse and a uniform, and goes after them as they're going to go and set up this opening of the Ark. He also manages to find a missile launcher somewhere, which is very handy. And so he kind of confronts the people with the Ark and says that if they don't give him the Ark and Marion, he's going to blow it up. But Belloc calls his bluff and says, you're an archaeologist, you're not going to destroy this. It's just not going to happen. So he's right, unfortunately. So Indy has failed in pretty much everything. He doesn't have the Ark, he doesn't have Marion, he's now captured by the Nazis as well. And he's going to have to witness the opening of the Ark, and presumably the first step upon the Nazis' kind of move to world domination. But he has one sort of trick up his sleeve, which is that he knows a lot about the Ark. He is the goodie and the hero, and there are 2 more sequels, which also gives him a bit of plot armor.
Mm-hmm.
So they set up for, just for gloating reasons, I think, they tie Indy and Marion to a pole so they can observe what's going on. But Indy knows that it's not going to go smoothly. He is well versed in Ark lore, and he tells Marion that not to look at it, that whatever happens, don't look at the Ark, shut your eyes. And so there's an absolutely amazing and really horrifying, especially if you see it at the right age, sequence where Balak kind of recites some Aramaic or Hebrew, I think, over the Ark. They have it all recording, so they've got kind of film cameras set up, and he opens it up, and reaches inside, and it's just dust inside. And obviously that's pretty upsetting that the stone tablets that Moses brought down are dust, Aaron's rod is dust, all the manna that's supposed to be in there is dust. And the tote finds this amusing because he's such a sadist. But the Nazi officer is quite upset. What's he going to tell Hitler? That they've just got an ark of dust. But as this is kind of unfolding, things start to get super weird. And so you see that there's some kind of swirling mist inside the ark, and then things go nuts. You see these kind of beautiful apparitions start to float everywhere. They kind of encircle the officers that are filming this. And I can't remember if it's Balak or Tote or the Nazi officer. One of the three says it's beautiful, and just as he says that, things go incredibly south. So these kind of beautiful angels turn into kind of screeching skeletal banshees and kill absolutely everyone apart from Indy and Marion, who are standing tied together with their eyes closed. And they do it's fantastically horrific. So one of them, his head kind of shrinks, like gets just absolutely kind of smushed. Tote, I mean, it's famously gory. His head kind of melts, so all his skin and flesh melts off just to leave the bone underneath. And Balak's head explodes at the sight of the ark. But nothing happens to Indy and Marion because they've got their eyes closed. And once everybody is dead, they kind of get reduced to ashes, sucked back into the ark, and the lid magically kind of puts itself back on the ark, onto the box. And only when everything's over do Indy and Marion open their eyes and see that their ropes also have been kind of burnt through, and they're the only ones left. So that's it, kind of happy ending. Indy manages to box up the ark. They take it back to the States. He goes to a meeting with these top government officials and wants to know where the ark is because they've confiscated it. He wanted it to go to the museum. That was the original plan, that it would go to the university museum. He's seen the power of the ark. He wants it somewhere safe, but the government officials fob him off and say that they have top men working on it. Top men. And you see this amazing last shot of an enormous warehouse filled to the brim with these identical kind of cargo crates. And you see one of the cargo crates have the ark put inside it, sealed up, just with a kind of US government number put on it, and wheeled into the middle of this kind of warehouse as a kind of needle in a haystack. And then the theme starts up again, and everyone applauds. And that's it, kind of in a rambling nutshell.
Yeah, that was very thorough.
This is the film I've probably seen the most times in my life, has to be said.
Yeah, it's up there with
Star Wars.
Probably Jurassic Park for me, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's almost a perfect film.
It is. I love it. Love Harrison Ford in it. The only thing that I would say is that, and I do love it. I hate to say this, but the only thing that Indiana really did to like change the plot was show the Nazis where the ark was.
Yeah, pretty much. But I mean, that could be a good thing. If he knew all along that it would destroy whoever opened it, then. Yeah.
But he didn't, did he? He didn't think anything was going to happen, right? He thought it was just an artifact.
Yeah, he kind of starts off being quite skeptical and quite dismissive of it. But then he cares enough to go and try and find it. So it's kind of hard to tell whether he believes in it or not.
Well, I think he believes in the historical relevance of it. And then it's hard to say whether he believes in the religious aspect of it. But my take was always that he was kind of a better safe than sorry type of person with that stuff.
Well, yeah. I don't have any nostalgia about this movie, so it's a pretty good movie, but I can play devil's advocate here. And we normally start with pointing out inaccuracies. And I mean, in terms of the archaeology, we're not going to be able to say anything that other people haven't already said 1,000 times about this movie. There's not really any good archaeology in it. It's right in the title. It's the Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's not the meticulous excavation and curation of the Lost Ark, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no archaeology really. There's only looting, essentially.
Yes.
There is an entire, like a huge scale archaeological excavation going on at Tanis, but they just sort of break in and dig up the one thing that they want. I guess are the Nazis in charge of that whole excavation, or is that excavation sort of incidental to these people trying to find the Ark, and they just sort of both sneak in and try and find the Ark? I was never clear about that part.
No, I think it's Nazi organized. That the impression I got, that because Salah says that they've got all the diggers, they've kind of taken all the diggers and not paid them very much. Very much sounds like the Nazis.
So, I mean, that excavation is where the real archaeology happens. In that first scene where he's trying to find the idol, there's no archaeology in that at all.
No.
In terms of a 1930s excavation in Egypt with a whole bunch of hired diggers who are locals, I mean, that part of it's probably relatively realistic. I don't even know if they were sifting like the dirt at that time. I think they were just sort of digging up and trying to find the big stuff and carting it back to England. So maybe it's not actually that inaccurate for the time.
Even at the scene, like it's a beautiful scene with like the silhouette of the guys digging, and India's just walking around pacing, right? While everybody else is digging.
Yeah. Too good to pick up a shovel.
Yeah.
It's not inaccuracy, but it's a choice by the writers. The city they're excavating there is Tanis, and they say that it was like lost, and they, like Indiana says in the beginning when he meets the government officials, he's like, they found the city of Tanis, but the city of Tanis it's a real city, but it wasn't really lost. Like it had been excavated for the first time in the early 1800s. I don't really know anything about it because I don't know anything about Egyptian archaeology, but I do know that the city of Tanis is a real place that has been excavated a lot, but certainly not found by the Nazis in the 1930s. There's a lot of airplanes in this movie, which have nothing to do with archaeology, but I just really like airplanes. And I didn't pay close enough attention to most of them. They all look relatively period accurate, except for that one plane with the fist fight with the guy that gets taken out by the propeller.
Yeah.
That's a really distinct looking airplane because it's sort of a flying wing, right? It doesn't really have a fuselage.
Yeah.
And that's not a real plane. That's just a Hollywood plane based on some later planes that you'd see in the war. I wrote it down here. It seems to be based on a plane called the Horton Ho 229, which was sort of an experimental flying wing plane.
Horton, here's a hoe.
Yeah. But the thing is, like in World War II, there was such like a fast advance of airplane technology, right? You start off with really simple airplanes, and then by the end, you've got rocket-powered planes or jet planes, right? And so the planes by 1944, 1945 look really weird like that thing, and this Horton Ho 229 was first flown in 1944. The movie takes place in 1936, I think, so you wouldn't have such weird-looking planes at that time. That plane is almost a decade out of date. Not out of date, out of time. It's 10 years too early for such a weird-looking plane like that.
Anachronistic.
Yeah.
There is a tiny bit of so when Indy's teaching his class of love-struck students, he does do some kind of archaeology exposition with his blackboard.
Remembers how to spell Neolithic. In the end, he pulled it out.
He needs some help, but yeah, he gets there. Maybe that's not his specialty. But yeah, apparently the diagram is, he has a diagram of West Kennett Long Barrow on the board, which is fairly accurate and is a real archaeological site. But what's interesting is that when he is shown in his classroom in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which is the kind of most recent Indiana Jones film, he's still teaching the same stuff. Like he's got the same diagrams up in the blackboard, which is, it's a fairly accurate representation of academia, I would say. That 20 years later, he's still using the same notes and images. I've certainly known lecturers like that.
And I looked online because I was trying to find out whether the textbook that he assigns them, because he says like Michelson chapters 4 and 5, if that was a real book, which I couldn't find if it was. But they said, so he assigned the same chapters to in the Crystal Skull.
It's probably his own book. I mean, that's why he's still assigning it like 20 years later.
Well, and then there was comments like on this forum where other people, like the great thing about this movie is that when you Google questions like this, it's such a well-known movie that someone has already asked them. You're treading in someone else's footsteps already, right?
Yeah.
We don't have to do groundwork. So I was looking in this, and some other people have tried to find the textbook. And so I was reading the thread of it, and someone was like, I can't believe that he's teaching that same stuff with the same book that many years later. And then someone else was like, well, he probably isn't a very good professor because he's always out in the field. Like, he probably doesn't update his notes or anything like that. And it's pretty funny.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, there's not a lot of archaeology for us to really comment on. So I'll just comment on the movie in general. Why, for me, this is not almost a perfect movie. There's a lot of stuff as an adult watching it that's I don't know. So Kim, I think you already said, and it's been said many times by many people already, that he doesn't actually really do anything in this movie to drive the plot apart from actually help the Nazis along their way, right?
Mm-hmm.
He kind of just sort of fails successfully until the Nazis take themselves out. And so, I mean, he's presented to us as this great archaeologist, great adventurer. All the girls love him, and he's so highly respected, but he succeeds at nothing in the entire movie. Right from the first scene where he finds the idol, and then even before he finds the idol, the guy's about to run forward. He's like, there's no danger for us here. And he's like, wait. And he looks at the ground like, there's a booby trap here. And he takes this club and he presses the booby trap with it, and an arrow shoots directly at him and hits the club. And he's like, see, I told you. But you didn't do anything except intentionally set off an arrow which could have missed that club by an inch and hit you. You just set off the booby trap and nearly killed yourself. And then he knew. Yeah,
he
did know. He calculated
He knew it was going to hit the club, right?
Yeah. He saw where it was coming.
He knows that the idol is on a pressure plate, so he's going to weigh out his sand, but he gets that wrong, destroys the whole thing, almost dies there, and then gets out and gets the idol stolen from him. So he just destroyed the ruin and also lost the idol he was going for. Right from the first scene, we're just setting up where he just constantly is failing, barely survives. And then all throughout the movie, he goes to Marion to get the medallion, doesn't succeed at getting it, and allows the Nazis a chance to get it and, in fact, get that burn impression on the hand, which is a pretty fun gimmick to drive the plot, especially since it's missing the other side. But if he had been successful in getting it from her in the first place, then the Nazis wouldn't have had it. And once he realizes that the Nazis don't have the full information on the medallion, what he should have done was, okay, I'm going to take this medallion far away so that they never find it, because that's the point, is to not let the Nazis get it. Instead, what he does is he goes to the middle of the excavation where the Nazis are looking for it and finds it. And then the Nazis are like, hey, what's that guy over there finding? And then they go take it from him. He just led them straight to it. And then, like you say, at the end, there's the standoff. He's going to shoot it. And the guy's like, you're not going to shoot it. I know that. And he's like, you're right. Tie me up and open it. He does absolutely nothing except possibly help them. And he's supposed to be this hero, but he doesn't really do anything very heroic in the whole movie,
I'm just going to say, shut your mouth.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you.
Shut your mouth.
He's playing the long game. He knows what's going to happen. So he deliberately leads the Nazis to the Ark so that they'll open it and kill themselves.
We can also talk about this discussion that's been going on in recent years about the relationship between Indy and Marion and her father. Mm-hmm. Which they don't go into the details in the movie itself, but they do in the script, and they do in some conversations between the writers that were recorded by George Lucas and Steven Spielberg and Lawrence Kasdan, and I think one other person who was involved in writing. And so what we get from the movie is that Marion is Indy's professor's daughter, and that they had some kind of affair, and for that reason he had a falling out with his professor. And Marion, when we meet her, she's upset with Indy, and she's like, I was a child, it was wrong, and you knew it. And he's like, you know what was going on. And he's not very sympathetic to her. But when she says she was a child, in the script, it's actually canon that she was 15 years old and he was 27 when they had this quote unquote affair. Mm-hmm. And I think it's been retconned in some other work in recent years that she was actually maybe 17, but like not really that much better. But there's a conversation between the writers talking about, how to make this relationship interesting. And they're actually like spitballing, and they're like, if she's, 18, it's not really scandalous enough. But if she's 12, that's like too scandalous. So they're like working out deliberately that 15 is still
too
sweet spot.
scandalous. That's not scandalous. That's child rape.
They decided in 1981, the writers of this movie, George Lucas and Steven Spielberg and Lawrence Kasdan, that 15 years old was the sweet spot for our hero of this movie to have sex with an underage girl. And he's never sympathetic about it in the movie. He's like, you know what? Stop being mad at me. It was a long time ago. You made a decision as a 15-year-old, and now you have to live with it. And in the end, she's like, you know what? Maybe I'm falling in love with you again. And he's kind of like, meh. My girlfriend was watching this with me. She hadn't seen it since she was a kid. And she's like, oh, come on, Marion. He's never going to love you.
I guess it's maybe period appropriate for the 1930s.
It's true. Probably already not great for the 1980s when the movie came out. Yeah. Definitely a little hard to watch with this background knowledge in mind today.
It's not anything. I didn't notice it at all until this time watching it. When she said that, then I was like, what did she mean? And then I Googled it and found all of that you're talking about. Before I watched it up to, tonight, I never clued in on any. Like, I knew that they had had a romance before, but it never really clicked on me that she was a child at the time.
Yeah. Pretty icky.
Yes.
And also, like you say, probably not really unrealistic for the time in the 1930s. And still, there's still a lot of stuff going on about not underage stuff, but, sexual harassment and sexual assault in archaeology. And it's the kind of thing where you have students and grad students working with professors. You're in the field for months at a time, sort of living in isolation sometimes. So it's a kind of field where stuff like that happens, and we have to sort of be conscious of it, right?
Yeah, and you have big egos, which Indy does have. I mean, some of the things that you brought up that were the flaws in the movie are because of his ego, right? So he's not going to just leave the Ark unfound. He's going to go find it, and that's his ego that pulls him there. Yeah.
Yeah, it does explain a lot of his actions, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The idea that he can get there first and get it out from under their noses.
Yeah. And a lot of the sexual harassment, well, at least some of the sexual harassment that happens today is because people feel that they're so great or untouchable, or, they can get away with it.
Yeah. Then it needs to be more accountability and oversight, I think.
Yeah, definitely. So thanks for ruining this, Josh.
You're welcome. That's my job. That's why I started a podcast to criticize movies.
I'm gonna go to bed.
Well, if you want me to ruin a little bit more, we could talk a little bit about racism too, because it takes place a little bit in Egypt. They get attacked in the streets, right? These guys jump out at them. There's a big fight. As you say, there's going to be a sword fight, but then Indy just shoots a man to death in the middle of a crowded street with hundreds of witnesses, then just walks away trying to find Marion, who he thinks is in a truck, which explodes. He shoots the driver of the truck, doesn't he? How does the truck explode?
Yeah, he does.
Yeah, he shoots the driver.
So he shoots two people to death in the middle of a crowded city. This is in Cairo, right? And then a truck full of explosives explodes in the middle of the city. And oh no, Marion was on that truck. Now I'm distraught. He cuts to him drinking at a cafe. You can't just walk away from two murders and a giant explosion in the middle of a crowded city. And shortly after that, Belloc walks in and he's like, I should kill you right now. And he's like, you're not going to kill me in the middle of this crowded bar. And he's like, I wrote it down. What does he say?
He says these people don't care.
He says these Arabs don't care if we kill each other. First of all, I'm pretty sure that Egypt was under British rule in the 1930s, wasn't it? So wouldn't, Britain have laws that governed Egypt at that time, which probably would have included just killing people in the streets?
People, yes, but Americans, I don't know. Yeah. and French.
And French.
There might be clauses.
that part always stands out to me, is like, you just murdered people in the street and then went to sit down at a cafe like you're untouchable, and then says Arabs don't care about us killing each other. Like Arab peoples are not lawless peoples. I mean, they're Muslims. The Muslims have pretty big, they have the same Abrahamic laws about murder, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, they've seemed fairly unperturbed by the killings of their residents in the previous scene. So why would they care about him shooting Balak?
Right. Anyway, and then something a little bit lighter, but one thing that kind of threw me out of this movie once in a while is that there's just a lot of weird screams. Like right from that first scene, the guy's macheteing through the jungle, and he machetes down some plants, and then this stone carving of a face of some sort of monster or something pops out at him, and it's kind of a jump scare. And you can imagine a jump scare like, I'm scared, but now I'm okay. But this guy's like, he cuts it down, and then he's like, ah, and then turns around and runs away. And then Indiana just keeps walking. And I guess the implication is that, like, oh, this must have some like religious or spiritual meaning for the guy, and he's scared of it, so he runs away. But like, they do something like this several more times. They do another jump scare like this when they're digging into the Well of Souls.
It's just to show that Indy is brave. The only thing that scares him is snakes. Everything else, like...
Yeah.
Sure, but I want all the other characters in the movie to also be people and not like cartoons, right? When they open up the Well of Souls and they find this like crocodile head god looking at them, and Sala does it again. He's like, ah! And that one's more of a jump scare as well. And he doesn't run away. He's like, oh, sorry, that scared me. But like, the scream is a little too long for a jump scare, right? And then the weirdest one is when they're on the boat, this sort of pirate ship at the end when they're trying to catch up with the U-boat.
It's also comedy, right?
It's just like... okay, this is the weirdest one, because they're... Indy is with Marion in the room, in the boat, and she's looking at a mirror, and then this mirror sort of like rotates on its central hinge, right? And so she flips the mirror and hits him in the jaw, and he screams, and it cuts to outside the boat, and the scream sort of fades away with lots of reverb, like, ah! And like, it feels like it's cutting to a new day, but then it goes straight back into the boat, and she looks around the mirror, and she's like, did you say something? Like, oh, that felt like we were cutting to a new day, but I guess it's just, that thing where you like zoom out from Earth to show how loud the scream was. But like, why did you fade out the scream if you're showing how loud it was? Why wouldn't you keep it loud? These are like small filmmaking things to me that like sort of disrupt the flow of the movie for me.
I love that scene, the one where she hits him in the face with a mirror.
Every time I watch it, it feels like, oh, we're cutting to a new day, but then it cuts right back to the same scene. It feels so weird to me.
My reading of it is that he's screaming, but it's at the same time as the boat's whistle or whatever it is going off, and that's why she says, "Did you say something?" And so it's sort of trying to show that she's oblivious to the pain that she's causing him because she didn't really hear it. But it's amusing because he's this really big, tough guy.
I mean, I get how the joke is supposed to be, but like when you like bump your jaw or stub your toe or like something like this, do you go like, oh, fuck? Or do you go, ah?
Yeah, but he got his jaw, like after everything that was already been done to him, he was already super sore and in pain.
I'm clipping so much on the waveform on these screams here. This is going to be so distorted.
What happened was that he hurt his jaw with a mirror, but then when he said "ah," that set off the ribs that he'd fractured or bruised, and that kind of prolonged the scream. And it just like triggered all those other injuries.
And his jaw could have been broken. Who knows?
Well, it didn't stop him from smooching later on, so presumably it wasn't broken.
It's Indiana.
Okay, finally, the weirdest thing about all of the Indiana Jones movies for me is that at the end of this one, God is real. Like, this is a Christian movie or an Abrahamic religion movie. Like, we don't like, there's no mystery to it. We open it up and like, I am God and now you Nazis are dead. Like, just for me, like maybe in the 80s, people were like there was less anti-religion or less unreligious people in the world, and it just sort of like maybe went without saying, oh, God exists, sure, of course, but like all of us are atheists here. I think we've talked about that a lot. It's just so jarring to watch a movie and be like, oh yeah, God is real and God killed these people. And it's not a Christian movie. It's not a religious movie, but just like as a matter of fact, like, yeah, everybody knows God exists. When you open God's box, everybody's going to die. Of course that's going to happen. But then in later movies, it's like, oh, also black magic exists. Whatever this.
It's just that magic and supernatural exists.
But also aliens, and aliens created humans, but also God exists, who says he created humans. It's just so weird to jam all that together and have it all real in this
Have you
movie.
not watched Supernatural?
No, I've never watched Supernatural.
You have to watch it. It explains all of this.
A movie called Supernatural is not...
a 15-season TV
kind of
series.
Yeah, the word supernatural to me is like, no, this is not the thing I'm going to watch.
Well, it explains all of it.
I think, yeah, the assumption would be that in the 80s, definitely more people would identify as religious. But also, I think that all the way through, well, almost all the way through, you don't really know whether the Ark is a real artifact with power or if it's just a kind of red herring. It's only really, I think, when there's that cool scene where they put it in a kind of swastika branded box to transport it back to Berlin, and you see it kind of supernaturally erase the swastika from the crate while some mice have a little rave in front of it. That's like almost sort of 4/5 of the way through the film. That's the only time you see any evidence of anything supernatural. Maybe so when he's getting the Jovito's idol or statue, there is the suggestion that its eyes move and watch him while he's going to pick it up. So maybe there's some supernatural stuff at the beginning, but it's very subtle. So I think that, yeah, it is possibly slightly more jarring to a modern audience to see, oh, okay, by the way, the Old Testament is real. But it comes as a surprise. It's not something that is taken for granted all the way through the film.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that I like less about it. Is like, oh, you've suckered me into a Christian movie. Like I thought I was watching an archaeology movie, but it turns out this is just a God is real movie.
Yeah, but
like changes the whole tone of it, right?
Like everything is real, so it's I don't know.
Yeah, it's not, like you say, it's not specifically Christian. It's all the three major monotheistic faiths have Moses in them and parts of the Old Testament. So it's, for a religious movie, it's fairly ecumenical, I would say.
Well, and in the Temple of Doom, with the one with the beating heart, right? Like that's real.
Yeah,
that religion is real.
It's Hinduism, I guess. Yeah.
So what I hear you saying is that the movies aren't Christian, they're not Abrahamic, but they are
supernatural.
They're every supernatural, but also aliens. Every conspiracy theory is real, so it's QAnon. Is that what you're telling me?
Not everyone. Like, it has nothing to do with... No, just the supernatural ones.
Yeah.
If you believe in one crazy worldview, it's a religion. But if you believe in all the crazy worldviews, you're a conspiracy theorist. Sorry for ruining this movie for you. Do we have anything else we want to say that's not me ruining it? Because that's all my major stuff.
It's water off a duck's back. We're just ignoring all of your...
We're just not, like, I'm just not even listening. I'm just replaying the movie in my mind right now as you're talking.
Marion, as a character, she doesn't really do much either. I mean, we've talked a bit about how Indy doesn't really do anything except fail. I mean, Marion is really there just to sort of scream and get captured. So I don't think... Well, this film definitely doesn't pass the Bechdel test, does it? There's only one female character, and that's it.
Yeah, is there another woman at all?
Actually, no, maybe it does, because she does... Salah's wife briefly speaks to her about the monkey.
Oh, right. Yes, they do talk about
maybe
the monkey.
Is the monkey a male?
But he's not a main character. Yeah, he's ambiguous. We don't know what he wants to be referred to as.
Yeah.
The monkey, by the way, is a capuchin, which is a South American monkey, which is something that's pretty common in movies to have a South American monkey in Africa. I mean, I guess we're in a sort of international city here. Somebody could have brought a monkey from South America. Indy had been in South America earlier in the movie, so.
When I was younger watching this, and the French guy has Marion in his tent, and then he gives her a dress so that she can be pretty so that they can have drinks together. When I was younger, I was like, ooh, now she gets a pretty dress. Like, that's nice. And then watching it now, I'm like, oh my God, that's so freaking creepy. Why did he have a dress with him? Like, oh my God, such a predator. Ugh.
And then he's leching at her in the mirror as well when she's changing.
Yeah. Ugh.
And he's French, so you know he's bad.
She got a dress from the boat captain as well,
But
and Indy pointed out, where'd you get this?
Yeah, but the boat captain, I could see women have been on the boat at some point in time before, right?
They're sailors, of course.
They're sailors, and like the boat, they're on the boat. The boat is like their house, like they're in their boat. Whereas this guy like packed a dress into the desert. It's weird. It just in the hopes that he might run into a woman who's size 6 or whatever it is.
yeah, that's it. Yeah, and it fits her perfectly as well, which is well. Maybe it's his hobby. Maybe as well as being a creepy Frenchman, he also likes to do dress design and embroidery. Maybe he made it himself. Are we judging him harshly?
Yes, it's creepy.
Okay. Yeah.
And then I finally Googled this. I've watched it so many times, I've never Googled it. I may have not watched it within the time that I have just like a smartphone and data right there. But when the fly walks into that guy's mouth.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I finally Googled it, and it's apparently the fly had landed on him and like walked in his mouth a little bit and then flew away. But Steven Spielberg thought it was funny or something. So he edited it with the clips. So just so it looks like it crawls into his mouth and disappears. That's what the guy says. And I'm like, I think he just swallowed a fly and didn't. Like, you're just too embarrassed now.
Yeah, quite possibly.
I guess that is my conspiracy theory.
But I like the way they edited it, because today, to do something like that, it would be pretty trivial, and you would like paint out the fly from, every frame. Yeah. What they did in this case is they just cut out 2 frames, because when the fly flew away, it was pretty fast. And so it was like only like 2 frames where you could see the fly going away. They just literally cut those 2 frames out entirely, and it doesn't really change the pacing of the film, so you don't even notice. Mm-hmm. But it makes the fly just magically disappear, which I thought was really easy solution to edit that.
Could you imagine you're like a pretty big character in one of the like most popular movies that spans decades, and everybody just remembers you as the guy that ate the fly?
And then your head explodes at the end. That's the other thing.
One thing I thought was a pretty good joke is where I think Belloc and Marion are in the tent, and Tote comes in. And he pulls out this thing. It was like a chain. It's like, what is this? Is it nunchucks? Is it something for choking? He's ominously handling this chain. He twists it together, and then passes it to the guy behind him. And it's a portable coat hanger for his
it's
jacket.
So funny.
That was great.
Yeah.
There's so many good gags,
little jokes like that.
It's pretty funny, at various points during the film.
Like it's when Indy beats up that guy to steal his uniform, but then the uniform's too tight, so then he has to beat up another guy to get a bigger one.
Yeah.
And also the other guy comes up and he's speaking in German. I don't speak German, but I heard the words fine. He's calling him a pig, so he doesn't realize he's Indiana Jones. He just thinks he's an officer who's slobby.
Yeah. and he starts like tidying himself up as a kind of distraction, and then just like boots him.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of comic relief from the monkey as well. Who
until he dies.
Until he dies. But he's a bad monkey, so that's fine.
He's not a bad monkey. He has a bad owner.
Sorry, that's true. That is true.
He was doing what he was told. He's a good monkey.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. But no, I think I remain impervious to Josh's ruination. It's still one of my favorite films.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Even tonight, like I usually I watch the movies. I start them at like 7, right? And I'm always like, okay, I gotta watch the movie, and it feels a little bit like a chore, right? Tonight I came home early so I could watch it.
Great.
And then I had to get my Indy tired out so he didn't make so much noise this time. So he's passed out at my feet now.
Well, that's good.
I know, but it means that I'm tired now too.
Well, do we have any more notes?
No, I think that's it.
Yeah.
I don't really want to talk about it with you anymore. I kind of feel like you don't deserve it.
Yeah, that's it. We're done talking.
I think you should go and Ross and I should just continue talking about it.
Well, we should maybe mention that there's a fifth one coming out fairly soon.
Yes.
Which already has a trailer, and it doesn't look terrible. But then the trailer for Crystal Skull didn't look terrible either.
Mm.
I'm cautiously optimistic. They use a lot of de-aging effects. Of course, Harrison Ford's 80, I think, now, or at least late 70s. So he's fairly old for an action hero. And so they use a lot of de-aging technology to kind of show his earlier exploits. But yeah, we don't really know a lot about what the film's going to be about, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. But if Lucasfilm want to send us some advanced copies for review, then I'm sure we'd be happy to accept that.
Well, I thought I saw a comment somewhere, I don't remember who made it online, about how the Dial of Destiny itself maybe looks like the Antikythera mechanism.
All right. Okay. That's interesting.
Yeah.
A Dial of Destiny is such a weird title
Yeah,
for a
it's
movie
a weird
to
title.
me.
It is. It sounds pretty boring, actually. Dial is not an exciting thing.
Yeah.
No.
Well, the Antikythera mechanism is this weird gear artifact they found off some Greek island in the early 1900s, and it's missing some pieces, so it took them a long time to reconstruct it. But it's basically what's the word for the thing that it is?
Almanac.
An orrery.
Almanac.
Orrery.
Orrery,
Oh.
right? It's basically a very fancy one of those things that you have in elementary school with the planets rotating around the sun.
Oh,
But
right,
it calculates. It's like a calendar that calculates events in the future. So it has the planets and other celestial bodies, but also other things like the Olympics. It calculates the date of the Olympics and where the planets and stars and stuff will be for Olympics in the future. So it's a very early kind of computer that's specifically used for calculating events in the future.
Mm-hmm. The pseudo-archaeology podcast does a really good episode on it.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. We can link that in the show notes. But I don't know how they're going to spin that into something mystical for the Indiana Jones movie, if in fact it is about the Antikythera mechanism. Because it's, again, I mean, they made a movie about the Mayan calendar, so I guess they can spin anything, right? Well, what are our final thoughts on Indiana Jones? You think it's one of the best of all time?
Yeah.
Yes.
Almost perfect film
Mm-hmm.
that can be watched again and again, and you'll notice something new each time and have fun while watching.
Literally for 40 years.
Notice something new each time, and everything you notice chips away at it a little bit. And you're like, I don't know about this movie.
Everything you notice confirms that it's great.
Yeah.
This is why I'm worried about our feelings about Encino Man, because we all have so much nostalgia for it. And if we didn't have the nostalgia, is it really as great as we think it is?
Yes.
If you've been enjoying Screens of the Stone Age, get in touch with us. Follow us on Twitter at SOTSA_podcast and on Facebook at SOTSA podcast, or send us an email to screensofthestonage@gmail.com. Screens of the Stone Age is supported by the Paleoanthropological Society of Canada. Find out more at pasc-scpa.ca.